2016. An otherwise ordinary weekend in Bangladesh. But something happened during that quiet weekend that shook not only the country but the world of banking security. A few employees of the Bangladesh Bank arrived at the office as usual, where only essential staff were present. They had no idea that the truth of the biggest digital theft in history was about to be revealed before them. They saw the bank's printer, the one that prints receipts for international transfers, spitting out paper without stopping. One receipt after another came out, and written on them were confirmations of billion-dollar transactions. The staff were stunned. This was not a small glitch. 81 million had vanished from the bank's account. It was clear this was not the work of amateurs. Someone, a group capable of breaching the world's most secure digital vaults, had broken the bank's security. The identity of this hacking group remains a mystery to this day, and it is linked to a powerful system whose name you will hear at the end of this story. So let's start today's true crime story. But before we begin, if you enjoy our true crime series, please like the video, leave your feedback in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. With your support, we can bring you even better cases. Bangladesh is a Muslim-majority country where the weekend falls on Friday and Saturday. During this time, most banks remain closed. Only those who handle essential work such as international transfers come to work. Now you must have heard the name SWIFT. It is actually a Belgian company that connects banks around the world. If someone in India wants to send money to the United States, that transaction goes through the SWIFT network. It is a digital system where the actual money does not move from one place to another. Only data is transferred between computers. Therefore, it is crucial that networks like SWIFT be secure and accurate. But what is important to note is that the SWIFT network itself was not hacked in this story. The SWIFT system is considered the most secure financial network in the world. So where did the real problem occur? To find that out, we must return to that Friday morning when the bank's doors were open only to a few people, and among them was the employee who monitored the transactions coming and going through SWIFT. Every international transaction has a digital record and a printed copy too, so that physical proof is kept. The SWIFT system runs 24 hours a day. Transactions occur continuously, day and night. On Thursday evening, after all staff had left at 5, they did not expect anything strange to happen the next day. On Friday morning, the employee who monitors SWIFT transactions went to check the printer. As always, he expected that the receipts from overnight transactions would already have been printed, because international transfers are not monitored at that hour. But when he looked at the printer, nothing had been printed. He could not understand how that could be. Had there truly been no transactions overnight, or had the printer simply not produced any receipts? After a while, he checked the digital log on the computer. It clearly showed that transactions had occurred overnight, and nothing in them looked suspicious. That meant the problem was only with the printer. The whole Friday they tried to get the printer working again, but it did not respond at all. It would not even turn on. Finally, when work ended, they decided to leave it as it was and go home, thinking perhaps it was a technical issue. Besides, the technical staff were not present that day because they were not part of the weekend essential employees. On Saturday, the essential staff returned to the bank while the rest of the employees were still off. Their first attempt was to somehow fix the printer, but despite hours of effort, the printer remained dead, and then suddenly it came to life. As soon as the machine began working, it started printing a huge stack of transaction receipts covering from Thursday night to Saturday morning. The employees assumed that what printed would simply be the transactions already recorded in the computer's digital log. But what they saw was worse than a nightmare. Among the receipts that came out of the printer, 35 transactions were ones that had no record anywhere in the computer's digital log. The total amount of these 35 transactions was 9. Where had these transactions come from, when there was no record of them in the system? These transactions had been sent to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in the United States. Bangladesh Bank has an account there, where the nation's foreign reserves, billions of dollars, are kept. Official requests to transfer billions of dollars to various accounts had been sent to those accounts via the SWIFT system. And the most shocking fact was that all the recipient accounts were in the Philippines. The bank staff panicked. Who had initiated these transactions? Who had authorized them, and how had they entered the system without being registered? But before they could answer these questions, they had to stop whatever money remained. They quickly checked all the printed receipts and discovered that 4 transactions had already been processed, sending a total of $81 million to the Philippines. The remaining 31 transactions, which made up the bulk of this billion-dollar fraud, had not yet been processed. Their biggest responsibility now was to prevent the remaining funds from leaving the Federal Reserve Bank of New York under any circumstances. The staff sprang into action and tried to contact the Federal Reserve, but a new problem presented itself. It was Saturday in the United States too, and Saturday and Sunday are weekend days in America as well, so they could not expect a response before Monday. They then contacted SWIFT, the company that manages these international transfers. SWIFT advised that the transfer system be shut down immediately, but to make that decision required the bank director's approval. When the staff contacted the director, his reaction was even more shocking. The director refused to shut the system down. He said perhaps it was a minor technical glitch that would soon be fixed. He did not take the situation as seriously as he should have, and sadly, even if he had taken it seriously, the situation might not have changed much. Sunday brought the start of the work week in Bangladesh, so the staff and the director returned to the bank. But in America the weekend was still ongoing, so contact with the Federal Reserve was still impossible. In any case, the 31 transactions would not be processed until the banks connected with each other. But the real problem was the $81 million that had already been sent to the Philippines. They immediately tried to contact the bank in the Philippines, where the money had been transferred, but there too it was the same situation Saturday and Sunday. No one answered. The biggest shock came when they learned that the bank would remain closed on Monday as well, because in the Philippines it was the Chinese New Year holiday. It was a holiday of the year. Now the question arises, why was there a Chinese New Year holiday in the Philippines? In fact, cultural ties between the Philippines and China are quite deep, which is why that holiday is commonly observed there. That meant Bangladesh Bank could not contact the Philippine bank before Tuesday. And here it began to become clear that all of this was not mere coincidence. Those behind this theft had planned their move very carefully. They carried out the entire operation on Thursday night, as Bangladesh was entering its weekend. They withdrew money from the U.S. Reserve account where no work happens on Saturday and Sunday, and transferred that money to a Philippine bank that would be closed for 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. In this way they linked the holiday calendars of 3 different countries to entirely block communication. That was their real trick. The longer the banks could not communicate with each other, the more time they would have to make the money disappear. When all lines of contact were closed, the staff of Bangladesh Bank were left with only one option: to email the Philippine bank. In their email they explained the whole situation. The funds transferred from their bank to the Philippines belonged to them and had been transferred illegally through a cyber theft. They requested that all accounts associated with these transactions be frozen immediately, but help was not coming as fast as the money had gone. Bangladesh Bank had no concrete remedy left. Every minute was precious, and they did not know how to stop this economic catastrophe. Bangladesh, one of the world's poorest countries, would feel the impact across its entire economy if the full billions of dollars were lost, not just the bank. Before we find out what happened after this theft, it is important to understand how the hackers reached the bank's transfer system in the first place. Their initial target was actually the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, because many countries keep their dollar reserves there. But the Federal Reserve systems are counted among the world's most secure, nearly impossible to penetrate. The SWIFT network we mentioned earlier is also an extremely secure international network. So where was the weakest link? The answer is the bank itself. Each bank is responsible for its own internal cybersecurity, and often banks in poorer countries lack the budget or expertise to upgrade security. So the hackers thought that if there was anywhere to breach within this global system, it would be Bangladesh Bank. Does that mean Bangladesh Bank was easy to hack? Not at all. The breach of Bangladesh Bank's security did not happen overnight. The hackers had infiltrated the bank's systems a year before this operation. For a year they monitored the bank's entire network quietly and undetected. They learned every system from the inside, how it worked, who did what, where security was lax. So what did they actually do? The first step of this entire hacking was social engineering, sometimes called social hacking. That means targeting people, not technology, understanding their habits, behavior, and thinking in order to deceive them. Today hackers have the greatest weapon for this: Social media. Most people share personal details there, and hackers use that information. The hackers first gathered all available information about around 40 bank employees. Then they sent emails to those employees, emails that looked exactly like they came from someone they knew. This trick also used information obtained from social media. The email typically read something like, "Hello, I am looking for a job. I heard you work at the bank. Could you tell me if any positions are open? Here is my resume." Now imagine if you receive such an email from someone whose name you vaguely remember, or who is connected to you. You would likely download and open the file. And that is exactly what happened. The file contained a virus. From the outside it looked like a simple PDF resume. But as soon as the employee opened it, the virus installed itself on the computer. Crucially, these emails were sent to work email addresses, so most files were opened on the bank's office computer. Within a few days, many employees had opened those emails, downloaded the virus, and unknowingly begun spreading it across the bank's entire network. Everything was so silent that no one suspected a thing, because the file simply appeared to be a resume. That was the first path to breaching the bank's security. It was human error, not technology, that failed. People were deceived. Once the virus was on a computer, it began to work. The virus recorded every keystroke, took screenshots of computer displays, and could even remotely control the computer. But this was not yet the attack phase. The hackers were still gathering information. Their real goal was to reach the computers that handled international transfers via the SWIFT network. Not every bank computer is connected to SWIFT. Access to that system is given to a very limited number of systems. Inside a bank, all computers connect through a network that typically includes multiple security layers. For example, the devices that connect computers together are called switches, and in banks those switches should have very strong security. But the switches used at Bangladesh Bank were cheap and had very weak security. Exploiting this, the hackers were able to move from one computer to another quite easily. Gradually, without arousing suspicion, they reached the target computer connected to the SWIFT network that handled international transfers. That was their true target. They moved very cautiously, because even the slightest hint to an employee would have ruined the entire plan. That's why it took them about a year to reach that system, and the easiest route to that SWIFT-connected computer was through one of the 2 or 3 employees who had access to it. The hackers hacked one of those employees' computers and stole his login, username and password. Now they had the access they had been seeking for months, the computer connected to the SWIFT network. When they fully understood the system and the plan was ready, they took the next step, the real attack. They chose the date and timing very carefully. As mentioned earlier, they planned to begin their attack on the night of Thursday, February 4. Why? Because after that, Bangladesh, the United States, and the Philippines all had consecutive holidays. From Friday through Monday there would be 4 days during which banks could not communicate. That window would block communications and give the hackers free rein. On Thursday evening, when Bangladesh Bank employees were finishing work and leaving at around 5 hours, the hackers gained remote access to the bank's systems. The bank was completely empty and they had full control. From the very computer that handled international transfers via SWIFT, they created 35 transfer requests and sent them to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The total of these 35 requests was about $951 million. At that time it was 10:00 a.m. in the United States. Staff were on duty and everything seemed normal. When the Federal Reserve received these requests, they accepted them as legitimate. Why? Because the Federal Reserve relies entirely on the SWIFT network. If a transfer request arrives through a valid SWIFT message with all details correct, they have no reason to stop it, no matter how large the amount. The hackers expected that all 35 requests would be processed without interruption, and the entire sum would be transferred to a bank in the Philippines. But something happened that perhaps no one expected. Only 4 of the requests passed. The remaining 31 were halted and put under review. The 4 transactions that were processed had a combined value of $81 million, which by itself became one of the largest banking frauds in history. But the hackers themselves were surprised. The other 80. The reason it failed was a strange coincidence, a hidden blessing for Bangladesh Bank. A coincidence that saved the bank from losing another $870 million. Now the question is, what was that coincidence? The answer lies in the Philippine accounts to which the money was sent. As soon as the tracing of these accounts began, a shocking fact came to light. These accounts were registered in the names of Chinese citizens. Most of these accounts had been opened about 10 months before the operation, and had remained completely inactive during that time. But on the night of the theft, suddenly millions of dollars were transferred into these accounts. All these accounts were in the RCBC Bank, Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation of the Philippines, and their branches were spread across different parts of the country. One of those branch addresses was Jupiter Street. Now, this name Jupiter was the most unusual twist of that entire episode. Coincidentally, there was another company somewhere else in the world, a maritime oil shipping company, that was also called Jupiter. But this company was linked to Iran, and since U.S. sanctions were imposed on Iran, any company trading with Iran was blacklisted by the United States. So, when the Federal Reserve Bank of New York saw Jupiter Street written in the address, they became suspicious that it might be connected to that sanctioned Iranian company. Although the Jupiter Street in the Philippines and the Iranian Jupiter company had no relation at all, the system as a security precaution flagged those transactions for review. And because of this, the 31 transactions worth a total of $870 million. That's what you call a blessing born out of an unknown coincidence. For Bangladesh, this was a huge relief. If that money had also gone out, it could have created a severe crisis for the country's economy. But the story doesn't end here. 4 transactions had already been processed. Now, the hackers were hoping that the remaining 31 transactions would also soon be cleared. They logged into the bank's system and waited inside the SWIFT network for 7 hours. But when it was 6 in New York, they assumed the day's work was over, and that the remaining transactions would be processed the next day. So they logged out of the SWIFT system, believing that everything that was meant to happen had already happened. But imagine, if they had waited just 1 more hour, they might have managed to withdraw the full $1 billion. Because at that very moment, some Federal Reserve employees were still working in the office. They were reviewing the transactions that had been stopped for some reason. When they looked closely, they realized that the Jupiter Street in the Philippines had nothing to do with the sanctioned Jupiter company in Iran, meaning the 31 transactions that had been stopped were actually halted due to a system error. As mentioned earlier, the Federal Reserve relies entirely on the SWIFT system. If all details in a transaction request are correct, it is never stopped, no matter how big the amount. So, if the hackers had still been logged in, they could have replied to the Federal Reserve through the same SWIFT system, and confirmed the transactions. That yes response would have been considered completely valid by the Federal Reserve. But luckily the hackers had logged out just an hour earlier. And not only did they log out, they did something very clever before leaving. They deleted all 35 transaction records from the bank's digital transaction logs, the ones they had created themselves. So, when the bank employees came in the next day, they had no clue about the destruction that had occurred the previous night. And the story doesn't end there. The hackers already knew that the bank had an automatic printer that printed a receipt for every transaction. So they had already disabled that printer beforehand, because they were already inside the network. Through that access, they had installed a virus in the printer so that as soon as the transactions were sent, no receipts would print. So, when a few essential employees came to the office on Friday, they only saw that the printer wasn't working, and not a single paper had printed. They checked the computer's digital logs, and only the routine daily transactions appeared there. Nothing looked suspicious. So they just thought the printer might have a technical fault. They had no idea that this wasn't a malfunction. It was part of a carefully planned heist. By Saturday, when they managed to fix the printer, suddenly it came back to life, and one by one all the old transactions began to print. Those 35 transaction receipts, with a total value of about $1 billion, appeared, none of which were recorded in the computer logs. That's when everyone was shocked beyond belief. After that, the bank staff and management immediately started contacting the U.S. Federal Reserve and RCBC Bank in the Philippines. But as mentioned earlier, it was still the holiday period. There was no response from anyone. They had only one option left: to send email. They specifically emailed the Philippine bank, requesting that the accounts receiving the money be frozen immediately. The total amount was $81 million. But at that time the bank management still didn't understand the full reality. They thought maybe someone had physically entered the bank and manually made the transactions on the SWIFT system. They spent 8 full hours reviewing the bank's security camera footage, but they found only one cleaning staff member. No unknown person had entered the building, and that's when it became clear that this was not a case of physical intrusion. It was a cyber attack, but the most astonishing part was that no digital or physical evidence was found. The hackers had done their work in such a professional way that they didn't leave a single trace behind. That was the level of their planning. On the other hand, as soon as the money reached the accounts in the Philippines, the thieves immediately got to work. The fake accounts that received the $81 million had been opened under false identity, and the person who directly helped open those accounts was the branch manager of the bank, Maya Dito. Maya was not only involved in opening the accounts, but was also fully cooperating with the hackers. This was all part of a pre-planned operation. As soon as $81 million was credited into those accounts, Maya began her work immediately. She started withdrawing as much cash as possible from the bank. She even requested large sums from nearby branches. By the end of the week, by Friday, Maya had converted $22 million into the local Philippine currency, the peso. Now, the important thing to understand here is that the peso has a smaller value, so $22 million meant hundreds of thousands of bundles of notes. Converting such a massive amount into cash was itself a huge and risky task. Maya had all these notes packed into boxes, and some bank staff saw her personally loading those boxes into a Lexus car. The car drove away with a few people, and the money went with. In this way, out of $81 million, $22 million was now in the hackers' hands in the form of cash. The remaining $59 million was still in the bank, and we will return to that part shortly. Now the question arises, were those $22 million safe now? Could those people use that money freely? The answer is no, because all that money could still be traced. Every dollar note carries a serial number, and all these dollars had come from the same bank. So, if they tried to use this money directly, the risk of being caught was extremely high. That's where the next phase of the plan came in: money laundering, meaning making the money circulate through a system where it would lose its traceable identity. Now the question is, why was the Philippines chosen? Because the Philippines is known for its many unregulated casinos and gambling dens. Every day, millions of dollars flow through them, with little to no government oversight. In such an environment, where the money came from or where it went is almost impossible to track. And that was the hackers' real advantage. They divided the cash among 10 to 15 people, all of whom had come from China. These people were probably not part of the core team that executed the actual hacking operation. They were hired for a specific job. Their task was to take the money to the casinos and start the laundering process. The plan was that they would go to the casino and exchange the cash for casino chips. Once the money was converted into chips, it was now completely disconnected from its original identity. After that, when they would exchange the chips back into cash, the new notes they received would have completely different serial numbers, making it impossible to trace them back to the original bank-issued dollars. And the most interesting thing was that in the Philippines, where the casino money came from didn't really matter. Casinos have no special financial auditing or government monitoring, and besides, it's not considered unusual for Chinese citizens to bring large sums of money into casinos, especially during the Chinese New Year holidays, when gambling dens are packed with crowds. Now the question is, if these people gambled, could they have lost their money? The answer is absolutely not, because their method was just as clever. They would play at a single table, only with members of their own group. No outsiders were allowed. Whether someone won or lost, the money stayed within their circle. The casino only earned a commission of 1–2%, which they received when the chips were converted back into cash. For them, this commission was a very small price to pay in exchange for clean money that could no longer be traced. In this way, they kept gambling continuously and gradually converted all that stolen money into legitimate cash. Meanwhile, the Bangladesh Bank was still trying to contact the bank in the Philippines. Finally, on Tuesday, when the Chinese New Year holidays ended, the employees of RCBC Bank returned to work. The Bangladesh Bank immediately tried every possible way to get in touch with the management of the Philippine bank. But even after the bank reopened, it took them a full 5 hours to reach any senior official. During those 5 hours, whoever they spoke to kept passing them on to another officer. Even though the Bangladesh team repeatedly emphasized that the matter was extremely serious and millions of dollars were at stake, it made no difference. When they finally reached a senior official, The truth that came out was shocking. The entire amount of $80 million had already been withdrawn from the account. $2 million had already been withdrawn earlier on Friday by Maya Dato, and now the remaining $59 million was also taken out within just those 5 hours on Tuesday morning. That means while the Bangladesh Bank officials were busy trying to contact their counterparts, the hackers in Maya Dato had become active once again. They used the same method to withdraw the remaining money and convert it into cash. This time the task was even easier, because it was the beginning of the week. The bank was fully operational, and Maya faced no obstacles. Now an important question arises. Why didn't Bangladesh Bank send its own officers to the Philippines? If they had sent someone to be there on Tuesday morning when the bank opened, and had frozen the accounts face-to-face by talking directly to the senior management, perhaps those $59 million could have been saved. But it seems that at the start, they had no idea of the full picture. Maybe they thought it was just a small technical glitch that could be fixed with a few emails or calls. But this carelessness cost them heavily. Eventually the entire $81 million disappeared. And when this news broke, it caused an uproar around the world. Every news channel, every newspaper, every website carried the story. It was called the biggest digital theft in history. But the biggest question still remained: who was behind it? An investigation began. Bangladesh, the United States, and the Philippines, all three countries' security agencies got involved. At first, no one knew who was behind the Bangladesh Bank hack. As mentioned earlier, the hackers were experts at erasing their traces, but even then they couldn't erase everything. Some clues were still left behind. However, finding those clues required cybersecurity and technical experts. When these experts examined the data closely, they noticed something astonishing. The malware used in the Bangladesh Bank hack had many similarities with another massive cyber attack that had taken place in 2014, and it was considered the biggest security breach in Sony's history. The attack had crippled their networks, devices, and systems. The company suffered massive losses. The group behind that attack was known to the world as the Lazarus Group. Now the question is, why did Lazarus target Sony? Some of you may remember that incident because it made big headlines at the time. Sony had made a movie called The Interview, a comedy in which two journalists were assigned to interview North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In the film, Kim was portrayed in a humorous and satirical way, which deeply angered the real Kim Jong-un. After that, North Korea began sending threats to Sony, warning that if the film was released, there would be serious consequences. The situation got so tense that theaters around the world refused to show the film. There were even threats of bombings and shootings. But public pressure on social media was immense. People demanded that the film be released. Eventually, Sony made it available online for viewing and purchase. Right after that, the Lazarus Group launched an attack on Sony's systems. Their network was completely shut down. Employees had to abandon computers and return to working with pen and paper, as if the company had gone back 50 years in time. Not only that, Lazarus leaked thousands of files and emails, including those of Sony employees, managers, and even celebrities. Some of these emails exposed major scandals and embarrassing revelations. From that point, one thing became clear: the Lazarus Group was based in North Korea, and it was believed to have direct links to the North Korean government. Now the question arises, are these hackers government employees, or is it a private hacking team that the North Korean government hires and funds? Whatever the case, one thing is certain: Lazarus receives direct support and control from North Korea. Now just think, the code found in the Bangladesh Bank hack matched the one used in the Sony hack. Security experts say such similarity is impossible, unless both operations were carried out by the same team. And this makes perfect sense because the scale and precision of both attacks were far beyond the capability of a small group. The one-year planning of the Bangladesh Bank hack, the reach to the Philippine accounts, and the laundering of money all point to a large organized operation. Adding to this, the involvement of Chinese nationals in the money laundering process strengthens the theory even more because of China's close relationship with North Korea. China is North Korea's biggest supporter, and the two countries share a border. That's why the United States and many Western nations consider the Lazarus Group to be the most dangerous hacking organization in the world. They might not be the best hackers technically, but when it comes to causing massive damage, Lazarus stands on top, because they have the full backing of North Korea. But they didn't earn this title just because of the Bangladesh Bank, or Sony hack. Their reputation as the most notorious cybercriminal group came after their 2017 cyber attack that shook the entire world. Those who remember that time will recall that in 2017, a virus spread across the globe. It was called WannaCry. This virus entered computers and encrypted all the files, locking them completely. Then a red screen appeared, saying your files have been locked. If you want them back, pay $300 in Bitcoin to this wallet address within 3 days. If someone didn't pay within 3 days, the ransom doubled to $10,000. And if no payment was made within 7 days, the files were deleted forever. But the real problem was that even after sending the money, many victims didn't get their files back. Why? Because the virus itself was poorly tested and full of bugs. In reality, only 1 out of every 3 victims who paid actually got their files back. Despite this, around 57% of the victims, whether individuals or companies, paid the ransom. It's estimated that the hackers extorted $70 to $200 million from this attack. However, the true devastation wasn't just in the ransom money, it was the global impact of the virus. Those who remember 2017 will recall that the scale of this attack was unprecedented. It spread to over 150 countries and infected more than 300,000 computers. The worst hit were critical institutions, hospitals, transport agencies, railways, banks, and telecommunication companies. The real disaster wasn't just that computers got locked, it was that these essential services came to a complete standstill. The total global damage caused by this virus was estimated to be in the billions of dollars, and that's why the Lazarus Group is considered the most dangerous hacking organization in the world today. Now let's return to the Bangladesh Bank hack. After this incident, there were mass resignations at the bank. The governor of Bangladesh's central bank, along with several directors and senior officials, resigned. But surprisingly, no hacker was ever caught, and neither was the Chinese network involved in the money laundering. Only one person was punished in the entire case. Maya Dato, the same branch manager who helped withdraw the $81 million from the bank. She was charged with money laundering, and the court sentenced her to 59 years in prison and a $19 million fine. She was the only person to be punished in this massive fraud. Now the question is, why did she do it? Was she bribed? If yes, did she risk everything for just $2 or $3 million? And if she was paid, then why didn't she flee the country? Or perhaps was she under some kind of pressure? The truth is, very little information about this aspect has ever come out. But one thing is clear, a 59-year prison sentence and a $19 million fine completely destroyed her life. It seems she was made a scapegoat, while the real thieves, the hackers and the missing money, are still hiding somewhere in the world. This was the biggest digital theft in history, and to this day the full truth behind the case has never been revealed. And as the world continues to become more digital, it's only a matter of time before an even bigger cyber theft, or a full-scale cyber war, shakes the entire world again. And with that, this story comes to an end. If you found this case shocking, please give it a like.